Welcome, welcome. I'm actually going to go ahead and get started. I am looking forward to our conversation today on the leadership. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank Missouri Botanical Garden. They were originally supposed to host this, but because of weather conditions, we decided to bring it into our virtual conference room. If you haven't had a chance to visit Missouri Botanical Garden, I encourage you to do so. It certainly is a place of beauty, resilience, and growth, qualities that really mirror the essence of Black leadership. And our panelists and moderator that is joining us this morning. So a heartfelt thank you to Botanical Garden for always saying yes to fostering conversations that matter. I also want to take a moment to extend a warm welcome to our moderator, Michelle Martin Bonner. Meaningful dialogue make her certainly the perfect guide for today's discussion. We're certainly grateful for her time and expertise in leading us through this important conversation during Black History Month. Today we stand, I believe, on the shoulders of trailblazers who have paved the way for progress, resilience, and excellence. Their leadership is not just about achieving individual success, but about lifting others as they are climbing or building bridges of opportunity and shaping our future. And this conversation today is a call to action. It's about harnessing our collective knowledge, influence, and commitment to drive meaningful change. And each one of our leaders here have helped me in my leadership journey, and I am really excited to hear more from them. So thank you again for being here, for bringing your insights, for your dedication to strengthening Black leadership. Let's make this a powerful and transformative experience. So now I'll be handing off to Michelle Martin Bonner. Let's get started.
Thank you, Jamie, so much. I'm so excited to be having this conversation today with these wonderful leaders in St. Louis, Black leaders and lessons for an inclusive future. And, it is Black History Month, and Black history is 365 days. Let me say that. Black Americans have contributed so much to not only this country, but the world. And so we will continue to do that. And so this conversation today, hopefully you'll be able to come away with some nuggets, some wisdom, and some things that you can use on a daily basis as we continue to forge forward. And I'm going to start off with the first question, but I'm also going to allow each panelist to just tell you a little bit about themselves and where they are from. And so our first question on this morning is, each of you has such a unique leadership experience. Could you share a brief overview of your journey and what has been a pivotal moment in your career that shaped your path toward leadership? And so why don't we start with Cheryl this morning with that question? And
Good,
we'll go from there.
and thank you. And so happy to be here. Let me jump right into it. As a project engineer for Standard Oil for 5 years, I moved from that to an interim role, and I'll come back to that pivotal moment. From project engineer, manager, sales, training, manager, to my own business, to now what has been the joy and wonderful responsibility of leading 9,000 plus girls at Girls Incorporated for 13 years is my proud present day relationship with community. So I'm going to go back to your question on pivotal moment. And that happened when I was 23 years old. At Standard Oil, I was asked to step into an interim role to manage 130 truck drivers. The steno pool, that's going to date me. Anyone who knows steno pool knows exactly what that means. And then 63 building maintenance people. I had a budget of $7.2 million at 23 that I had to manage. What that taught me was about teams, taught me about accountability, but more than anything, it taught me about helping to shape a culture and how important that was. So that was a pivotal moment for me in my leadership role because I had never, ever had that kind of responsibility. And that has taught me how to continue to move through adversity, but also move with people. So thank you for the question.
Awesome. Dr. Cheryl. So we got two Cheryls, Cheryl and Dr. Cheryl.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And thank you also for the question. I've had a very circuitous career, if anyone knows. So I started out as a surgeon. I loved working with residents, loved teaching. I decided to go back and get my MBA after I realized that medicine was not this altruistic opportunity that I went into it for, but it is a business. Actually loved when I went back to Northwestern, got my MBA, and then came out and did the corporate trail for healthcare. Was on work for large companies like Baxter Healthcare, had my own consulting company at one point. My last corporate hop was with Merck KGaA, the German company, where I ran a $100 million division, and it was actually a transformational turnaround for that business. Stayed there for 2 years. We actually got the business, instead of losing 2 million, which is what the Germans told me they were booking me to lose, we actually brought in 4 million in profit. And that was a lot of work. It was a lot of sleepless nights, but I learned so much. Came back into the St. Louis market, got engaged with our startup community, led a regional initiative to get more women and people of color to start STEM companies in this region. And we were so much successful that we were actually invited to the Obama White House to talk about the impact that we were having in the St. Louis market. Also have started several companies here in the region. And during my tenure at BioSDL, I was a board member for the Y, but had to transition off the board because I was really impacted with leading this new initiative for the St. Louis region. So it's circuitous how the recruiter came back to me almost 4 years ago when this opportunity arose. And at first I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. But then I thought about, God puts opportunities in your path for a certain reason. And I thought about, the women that we serve 10,000 women and their families annually, that I could bring some impact based on the experience that I've had throughout my career. And just like Cheryl said, this has been the most satisfying work that I've done throughout my career. Most pivotal point, I can't pinpoint a pivotal point, because each time that I have transitioned from one role to another, I've learned so much in each one of those roles that has helped me to become the leader that I am right now, and leading an organization that's 120 years old, and we expect to be growing and here another 120 years. So thank you.
Awesome. Andwele?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all today. Much like Dr. Cheryl, I began my career as a clinician, as a physical therapist. I came from Birmingham to St. Louis to Washington University to get my doctorate in PT. And one of our first and earlier assignments was to sit in a corner somewhere publicly and observe people moving. I chose the corner of Euclid in Maryland, right there where Coffee Cartel used to be. And I just sat and observed. And the assignment wasn't necessarily just to only observe people's biomechanics, but understand how the environment shaped their movement and how their movement shaped the environment. And for me, that was just the beginning of trying to understand what we call now the social drivers of health, how the environment plays a broader context to one's well-being and health. It wasn't enough to just have a total knee replacement, metal in your knee, but what good did it do if you couldn't climb the stairs or squat to use the bathroom in dignity or kneel at church to pray with your community? And so going from grad school into practice, I realized how much of that wasn't part of medical care or physical therapy. It was a little card that determined your outcome, your insurance card, whether you had it or not, or your ability to pay. And I saw the disproportionate impact to people of color and the patients I was treating, and the limited impact I could make from the role as just a PT. Most I could do, I did. And then that led me down a path of trying to understand, how do health systems really work? And that led me to, much like Dr. Cheryl, getting my master's in business and healthcare administration. It led me down a path of healthcare administration. So I came back to WashU, did a 2-year fellowship in executive management fellowship in healthcare finance, upon which I had the opportunity to work across Washington University School of Medicine, BJC Healthcare, and other partners in community around the health ecosystem, and which gave me the opportunity to now lead the Integrated Health Network, which is based here in St. Louis, both in the city and county, working across institutions to address health inequities, health disparities, and really address the systemic and structural barriers to improving wellness and health for our communities that have been historically disinvested and disadvantaged. And so, and I would say along my career, the pivotal moment, I think, for me was probably when I left just working at one of my clinical facilities and applied for another staff physical therapy job. And I remember the senior AVP of the assistant vice president of the company saying, "Hey, you know what? You're applying for a staff job, but we happen to have a director role open." And I was like, "Well, I know nothing about anything about running a clinic." And he says, "Well, you've done enough along your career, taking chances to step into leadership roles, even though they were not named so." I think that for me was an opportunity that was given to me, one that I took that led me down a path again towards pursuing healthcare administration and learning the business of healthcare in a way to address systems and structures that can improve well-being and reduce health disparities in our communities. So thank you.
Sean, last but not least.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I'm a little bit disappointed that I'm not able to see everybody, but this is a welcome platform to speak to everyone too. You know, when I think about my journey, it's not a typical one. It started blue collar, then went to hospitality, and then went into education, primary, and then higher education. So I won't take time to talk about that because it is not a traditional pathway to where I've landed. But I've had some experiences and a turning point or a pivotal point, as you say, that I had. I got to go to Moscow 5 years ago. And it was interesting because they wanted us to partner with their what they call the Moscow International Medical Cluster. They needed an American university partner to train doctors at 2 hospitals that they were building. And they wanted to build the hospitals there because those who needed care or surgery would go out of the country to receive that care. The reason why it was pivotal, I never saw myself leaving the country to embark on anything like this. And so it took a great deal of confidence on myself to lean into that opportunity and to learn, to go out and learn from the people of Moscow who had a really difficult time in the 90s to get to the place that they are today. Professionally, I had an opportunity to understand what a true private-public partnership looks like, you know, from the ground up. And that was really helpful because what I found was you're only limited by your imagination.
Mhm.
And so we had a room full of people who were imagining an outcome from 2 very unlikely places, an American university, and of course now they're enemies of the state, but at the time they weren't. And trying to come up with a solution, a medical solution that could be a win for the people of Moscow, and of course be a win for the medical city that we had in Orlando at the time.
Wow. So I hear so much in everything that you all have shared, and I hear where there were some moments where you just had to make some decisions, but people also saw something in you. And so each of you have navigated your personal, your professional challenges. As a Black leader, can you share some a specific moment where you felt the weight of those challenges and how you overcame them? And before, we came on, I talked about right now during this time, people are feeling heavy, they're feeling weighted with all the challenges that we're facing. And so I think this would be really, an opportunity to get some nuggets from you all as you've navigated, not only been given these opportunities, right, but just being able to be successful in them, but knowing that it's not always easy. So, Andwele, let's start with you.
Well, thank you for that question. It's a tough one given the moment we're in. I was going to say my answer is now, right? Where you feel that weight. But I'll go back briefly to that opportunity that seemed like an opportunity to run a clinic when I was a staff member. What was not told of me was that the intention was to close that clinic all along, right? Right. I was supposed to keep the clinic running until the lease ended. And not knowing that, I did what I could, learned what I could, and ended up almost breaking even by the end of the year. I got the job in March. I had 9 months. I almost turned it around. And it caught the attention of senior leadership within the company to say, let's keep it going and see what happens. And this was in 2008, 2009, a similar moment to where there was a recession and a lot of our part of our company were losing market share and losing revenues at -2%. I was growing at 10%. And they couldn't figure out how I was doing it. But this is often the positions we are placed as Black leaders to come in and clean up somebody else's mess or sustain an organization that was failing. And it's through hard work, perseverance, and support of community and my patients and my family that I was able to do so. And people willing to share wisdom and knowledge about how to run a business, even when I couldn't read a profit and loss statement. I was like, P&L, what is that? Had no clue. But then I grew a business, right? Because we're resilient, resourceful. But that shouldn't be always the case. And we're in a similar moment now where people are going to lean on us as they are taking away rights. They're taking away even words, diversity, equity, inclusion, words we can't even speak into the air and oxygen. And so with the weight of that moment back then and the weight of now, I always say it's important to stay centered on what brings you to the work that you're doing. And remember that you're not alone, standing in community and with arms around you with the people on screen today that have supported me along my career here in St. Louis and those who were in Atlanta. So I would say, navigating those moments require understanding that you are not alone.
Dr. Cheryl?
Andwele, we must have lived in the same time frame because literally when I went to Merck, that was a transition for me. And when I joined the company, that was about 2009. It was during the recession. And I joined as leading a marketing organization within a division. And within 8 months, they split the division into 2 divisions. And the woman that was leading the entire division at one point, they split it and gave her the biotech side, and I got the consumable side, which I always laugh and say, oh, you got the sexy, I got the dog. Okay. And what I say about the dog is that it was a it was a cash cow for the business, but never invested in. So when I got there, literally, I had to downsize. I mean, we were fat and happy, too many people. When you looked at my distribution, it was upside down. My numbers were upside down. So it's almost like what you said, Andwele, is coming in and cleaning up a situation that I did not create. And it was cleaning up a situation during the height of the recession. And one of the products that actually we sold was a byproduct of the housing market, which when the housing market collapsed, acetonitrile, which is a product that's used in all research markets, kind of disappeared. So it was through literally, and I was the only Black woman leading a division in a German company. So, and I was given, the task of, well, we're going to book you to lose 2 million because we already know you're going to lose 2 million. Well, for me, don't tell me how much I'm going to lose. That just instills me more to figure out how do we work ourselves out of this situation. And literally, I couldn't hire anybody. So my senior staff, I'm a big learner. It's like, let's figure out what works in other industries. Let's take what works in those industries and apply them to your businesses. So it was through thinking through different models, actually bringing on some new models that we were able to climb out of a mess that took years to create. But like I said in the beginning, instead of losing 2 million, we brought home 4 million in revenue, which was a feat. It was sleepless nights. It was being scared to death half the time because I was in a whole different other state. I wasn't here in Missouri. My family was here in Missouri. They hired me and flew me out to Jersey every week. I didn't have any friends out there. I didn't have any support structure out there. So it was really trusting my instincts and believing that God put me on this path and trusting that He put me here for a reason. I'm going to make some mistakes, but it's okay. But it was funny, 5 years later after I left the organization, the guy that actually sat in my seat as the interim, I came in, I didn't know this. I took his seat. I kept him in the on the team, but he came back with a really nice Christmas card and said, "Cheryl, you taught me a lot around leadership. You taught me a lot on how to create culture in teams, because I I had only white men reporting to me. I didn't have a woman reporting to me at all. So this was a very different culture. It took a lot of learning, and he gave me that credence with this Christmas card 5 years later that said, I learned a lot, and I'm applying what you taught me to the teams that I have right now. That to me was not just turning the organization around, having someone see the work that you did and it impacted them and they moved forward with it. So thank you.
Leading by example. Leading by example and always teaching. Cheryl, you like to?
Sure. Mine was Bristol Myers Squibb, and I do have medical in my background as well, you guys. I was a trainer, and I was asked, again, very young, to create a diversity council and a diversity training program. I knew nothing about diversity training at the time. This is early 90s, 80s, 90s. And what I was told is because you're Black and a female, you should be able to run this very seamlessly for many, many divisions. And I'm like, I have no idea. Send me to training. Well, lo and behold, not only did that training set me up for my next career, which is my business itself. One part of my business was around diversity training. And it gave me an opportunity here in St. Louis to meet some of the top leaders. So I was working with Anheuser-Busch, BJC, Edward Jones, some of the very people and companies that I today are partners with. But it was an opportunity for me to grow, for me to also set the record straight around what diversity was and was not. And it was an opportunity to go into a space that I had never ever thought that I was going to be considered, and I do air quotes, expert, because expert scares me a little bit. I don't think people who are experts really, you better keep living and keep learning. And so I think that was one of those times for me, but it also fast forwarded me to Girls Inc. and was tapped along with 2 or 3 other leaders when the Michael Brown situation happened, and was asked to go in and to work with the kids in that community and build community. Because again, folks didn't know what to do, how to do it. And because of the experiences that I had, this was my community. This was something I knew very well. And to everyone who's had this statement, I wasn't alone. So I built a team of people, a community of people that went in with us. And so for that, I think it was a time where relationships matter, and it always does. And so I'm always reminded by that. So thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Sean?
Yes, I handling disappointment has been difficult throughout my career. The way I've dealt with that is looking inward and looking at ways that I can improve. And I have examples of that. But professionally, I'm a disruptor. And I've always found myself in places where there was a need to implement something new. Not necessarily improve something that was failing, but really implement something new. And I've been lucky, blessed that those have always worked out. I'm going to add a disappointment. In all of those stops, I have not been able to improve the K through 12 pathway pipeline. In the 3 states that I've lived in, the 3 institutions I've worked with, we really haven't found a way to partner to make that work. And a lot of things that we'll need to do will be at a scale, and scale is a scary word for many.
Mhm.
But there has to be a way that we can all get in a room at some point and talk about not just repairing the pipeline. We'll need to do that, but how do we, and when I say repair the pipeline after the fact, right? When somebody graduates from high school. But what do we do for those kids who are going through the primary grades and secondary school?
Yes, yes. Our education system, there's a lot to be said and a lot to be done and a lot to be seen. But uh, when I was growing up, for me, we support each other, and I think when I look at you all, and I think about the education, the experience, and the background that you all hold, there's so much there. But you often get exhausted. You get tired of always having to come in and challenge and fix and do these things. And let me say this, Missouri is a red state. Missouri is a slave state, okay? You have to know the history of Missouri. And as we talk about this, it's Black History Month. As a Black leader, you all have overcome a lot of challenges. But what are some common barriers that Black leaders face in St. Louis? And how can organizations and individuals better support Black leadership in the community? I'll speak for myself. I was born and raised here. I'm a little Black girl from North St. Louis City. But one thing I do know is I know God. I know that it's important to lift up others, that bring others with me, but definitely want to hear your perspective on what it is going to take and what are the barriers and how do we help each other in this community as Black leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So who wants to start? I'll let you all. Dr. Cheryl, you want to start?
You were gonna
All right,
say.
Sean, you took your mic out. Come on, Sean. Let's go.
It's respect. It's a big respect. So it's being seen, being heard, being valued as an equal contributor. I don't like to go places and tell people what I do. So normally I sit there and they'll say, oh, who do you work for? It always comes up. And I'll say, I work for WashU. And and one time this guy said, oh, you in athletics? And I said, no, facilities, right? Just leave me alone. And so there's a respect element that I think that individuals need to have, and might not just be specific to St. Louis, because I am a stranger here. I will admit, I've only been here 3 years, but there is an element of just respecting somebody just as the person that you see, without knowing what they do, where they work, and I'll say it, what high school they went to. That's a lot.
And Sean, I'm like you, I'm not from here either. I'm from Chicago. And the first time I got here and somebody asked me, what high school did you go to? And I was like, surely you're talking about college, right? Until I understood what those dynamics meant. But I just want to say, when you talk about common barriers, I think for all of us here, it's looking at how do we extend networks? How do we coalition build? Because we cannot do this work by ourselves. We have to understand how do we pull together those networks that can be supportive of the work that we're doing. I know at the Y, being able to serve as many women as we do, and especially women in crisis, women who've been assaulted, and even on our Head Start program. It is all about how do we bring people together to support the work and what we're trying to do. One of the examples we are looking at how do we stand up new schools to serve more and more children, because childcare is a crisis in this country. And how do we go beyond not just our Head Start babies, but being able to bring in community folks who are under-resourced and they don't get dollars from Head Start, and folks who are in the workforce and can't find adequate, affordable, accessible childcare. We've been able to partner with like the innovation districts because they see the value in being able to have childcare in these districts. We've been able to partner with other organizations to be able to stand up these new schools, because what everyone understands is that Head Start gives all of our children a head start in education. And one of the things that I believe in, and I know this wasn't probably part of this question, is, we have to look at this city as being, when you talk about inclusive, I look at Tennessee as a model, because the governor of Tennessee, he believes in education for all of his citizens. And he believes in education and workforce development so that you have an able, ready, and educated workforce to go right into companies. And when you have that, and you have people working, and you have people contributing, you have less need of the safety net organizations in your city. And I think that's something that, and this is just a broad thing, I think we need to be looking at, Dr. Armstrong, as you talked about, how do we serve our not only our itty bitties, but our children through the educational system so that they are ready for workforce opportunities and can thrive in our communities, and not just housing them and getting them through 8th grade and K through 12. When they come out, they're not workforce ready. So I know I said a lot, but that's one of my biggest thing is, how do we get a coalition across this great city so that we can move people from just surviving to thriving?
No,
Sounds like we have to really just break down barriers among ourselves as well, right? I mean, you talked about not being from here. We talked about people asking you what high school you went to. Those are biases. Those are biases where people are trying to size you up, trying to figure out your socioeconomic status. Some people don't believe that, but I'm always going to say what it is. It is what it is. And when people come to St. Louis, I remember when Yami came to St. Louis, I reached out to her because I knew St. Louis can be very cliquish. But we have to get out of that. If we want to be progressive, if we want to be inclusive, we have to be able to do that. So Cheryl, would you like to add?
Yeah, so I was just going to add on to Dr. Cheryl's comment. I am from St. Louis, Michelle, and others just like you. And even coming back, the same question, what high school did you go to? And I'm like, excuse me, you mean undergrad or grad? And then high school, and the person actually walked away from me when I told him I went to Northwest High School. But I was okay with that because I've seen the person since, and now we have a different conversation. But more than that, Black leaders and St. Louis is going to have to get around one issue. And I'm so with you, Cheryl, education, workforce, but education is it for me. And if we could just say that a child, any child, no matter what zip code they say they want to go to college, we put our time, effort, and talent around, and treasures around that child. So every child, no matter who they were born to, where they were born, they are able to go to college. And then we can start having the discussion around having qualified workers for the St. Louis area. And then it may not even matter what high school you went to, because then we can have the real conversation about where you are now today. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's true. And when you think about the root of all of this, and given Black History Month and where we are in society, racism is at the root. That's why it's so hard to extract it out of the ground. And in the workplace, a study just recently published said that 36% of Black males have to prepare themselves to face racism when they walk into the workplace. Black women, 46%. So if you think about the emotional labor before you even arrive at the doorstep, and organizations and companies that have Black leadership, just know we're walking in already at a heightened state. And then since 2019, the percent of Black leaders in leadership have dropped from 20% to 16%. And I always preach, like, if you want to change, you got to change it at the board level, you got to change it in the boardroom, at the leadership table, all the way down throughout the organization. Because you'll see pay disparities, rank inequities rooted throughout the companies, rooted throughout communities by zip code. And you can see the health disparities drop by 18 years of life expectancy between where I live in the city to where others may live in Clayton. And then some of the drivers in this article talked about how AI and technology in Black companies, in Black communities, raised that the article raised concerns that AI could widen racial wealth gaps by $43 billion annually.
Yeah.
And so right now at IHN, Integrated Health Network, I'm partnering with BioSTL, Dr. Cheryl's former company, and others in space, thinking about how do we make AI and technology, if we're thinking forward, future, we know there's a lot in our past, but how do we not let the future continue to perpetuate inequities in our communities and create a utility, public utility for AI and technology, and how we can leverage that in a positive way to build networks, mentorships, and so forth, to really think about how do we get at some of the root structures that you guys have mentioned, from education to housing, to employment, to investment. How do we make sure we make those right choices going forward? So thank you.
Oh, with all that being said, I've heard so many nuggets. And when we talk about education, 0 to 5 is that developmental age group. I'm a retired foster adoptive parent, so I only did baby 0 to 5 because I knew that I could build a foundation for the babies who came to my home. But I don't see that happening necessarily. And that's why it takes all of us, right? It takes all of us to be committed and dedicated to ensuring, because when we talk about education, really what it is the people are operating out of fear, right? By 2045, we know that white is the minority, it is not the majority. And the Federal Reserve did a research paper that shows, because of educational disparities, our labor market, that the US has given up about $17 trillion, okay? Just by that alone, because of the racial disparities in education, right? And the labor market. And so what are we doing to prepare individuals so that they can take care of themselves, so that they can do the things that they need to do? And so it takes all of us, but we have to be intentional about it, right? We have to support each other. And so I'm a troublemaker of the best kind, because see, I'm just gonna say what needs to be said. And that has got me in trouble, and but that's okay. But what I don't see is, let's talk about our young people, right? There are probably lots that are on here today. What would you tell our young Black professionals who aspire to become leaders in this community, in terms of, what does that look like? And how do you even do it? How does it happen? Because I've heard some amazing opportunities that you all have been given. I mean, to get a $23 million no, $7.2 million budget at the age of 23, 100 million budgets. I mean, how is that happening? And what would you say to a young person, a young Black professional who's aspiring to become a leader?
I can start. So I would go back to what my parents and my grandparents and others told me. And for me, it's still true to this day, is meritocracy is just a word. But because you're Black, you've got to be twice as good. You got to work twice as hard. You have to pick up the books and read and do your homework. Now, the piece that I also picked up, not so much my parents, they didn't say it quite like this, but others told me, find someone who is your mentor, your coach, and also your champion. And so make sure that you have people around you that are going to tell you the truth. And when you get that truth, take some of it, leave some of it, borrow some of it. But please, please, please have your listening ear on all the time. And then the other piece that is going to be so true is, if you see someone that you want to be like, don't be ashamed to model yourself around them or like them until you become your authentic self. Borrow anytime you need to, but get people that are going to champion you and champion you all the time. So that's what I would say to a young person. And that's what I say to the girls of Girls Inc. When we say strong, smart, and bold, you've got to have some strong people, some bold people, and some smart people around you. So thank you.
Andwele?
Yeah, I just recently came back from Kigali, Rwanda, and the median age of the country is 19. 65% of the country is under the age of 30. And a lot of them are running the government, and successfully so 30 years after the genocide. And one of the things I did was go to a university there, African Leadership University. And one of the things that they impart on the students, they don't have majors. They have mission. So when you walk in, you don't say my major is chemistry, right? You have to understand, what is your mission? And I think and then beyond that, what problem are you trying to solve? So when you talk to the students and the young people there, they understand what their personal mission is in life, and they understand the problem they're trying to solve. And then from there, they take off in entrepreneurial roles, leadership roles throughout the country. And so I would say for young people starting their careers, the reason why I am where I am, I never named a job I wanted to be in. I named a problem that I was trying to solve, and that was people not moving well and being able to integrate in society and suffer illness or injury that they couldn't overcome. And my mission was to solve that. And so through that, I think you'll naturally build meaningful relationships. You'll naturally complete the tasks in front of you, and others will recognize you for doing so. And then also, I would say the last piece of it is make sure you save space for healing and rejuvenation. Because you're going to walk into circumstances and situations where you're not always going to be rewarded, recognized, and supported. So just make sure you have a network of community to help you stay strong in those moments.
I love that, Andwele, have a mission, because I think as professionally, for me, I have, like I told you, my career has been very circuitous because I took on opportunities that scared the hell out of me. But I was like, you know what? I think I want to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but this is something that I want to do to be able to expand my knowledge. And what I will say to young Black professionals, make sure that you are always learning, because you need to always be able to think. You need to be able to critically think. You need to be able to assess. And I would also say be financially astute as well. Because moving in circles, especially in business circles, it is about, a lot of times the bottom line and profit, and how does that profit work in whatever industry that you're in. I would also say, if you're going to ask for mentorship, understand what you need and understand what you're asking for. Because people will say, oh, I want you to be my mentor. I'm like, what does that mean to you? So be specific, but I would just say educate yourself, collaborate with folks, and they don't necessarily have to be people that look like you, and be willing to learn, to have the activism, but to learn and know how to move in certain circles to get things done. I absolutely love the fact that we have a lot of young people who are on fire, which is great. How do you direct that so that it's not impacting you negatively, but you are moving the needle forward? That's my thing. How do we move the needle forward? And can I come back to, I think, Andwele, what you talked about, taking care of yourself? Because I will tell you, in these last few weeks, it has been challenging leading the organization that I'm leading. When they talk about freezing funds and things like that, that put a lot of folks, I know, especially for us, we are heavily dependent on government funding. But one of the things that it makes me think about is strategy. How do we become less dependent on government funding? And that's what we're looking at doing right now. But the mental health toll of every night when you turn on the news, because now I have to, because I have to know what the hell is going to happen in the next day and how that's going to affect the people that we serve or my employees, it becomes very weighty. It becomes very, very hard. So for me to get through it, it's through a lot of prayer, through workout, and connecting with like-minded other professionals that are going through the same challenges, and trying to figure out how do we move forward. Because that's what I always go back to Martin Luther King. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl, but just keep moving forward. And that's what we all need to do.
Exactly. And you have to take care of yourself, because you can't help anybody else if you're not well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we are at about 9:15, and I've heard a lot, and thank you all so much about, first of all, do it scared. Okay, you just got to trust, in yourself that you've been given. God has given you every gift, every talent that you have, but you got to trust that you can do it, but do it with Him, and that depends on what your faith is, what your belief is. Mission. When we talk about our young people in education, the world is afraid of their potential, and so we have to make sure that that potential is developed and turned into their purpose, because that is how we move forward. One thing I want to share before, and I think I'm gonna open up for question, is trying to erase diversity is an attempt to erase humanity. God created the world, depending on what your beliefs are, and you cannot erase humanity, no matter how hard you try. And it is up to us. And so in order to be more inclusive, not only here, again, it's going to take all of us. We have to do it together. It takes education, I've heard. It takes tenacity. It takes strength, right? But the willingness to do it and move beyond. And the other thing I would say is love your haters, because your haters make you better. Right. So, Becky, if you have questions, do you have any questions in the chat or in the Q&A?
Michelle, thank you so much. We do have a couple questions that are in our Q&A. Andwele has one specifically to him. I believe he's seen it. If you want to go, it's how does AI raise racial gaps?
Yeah, I would say if I localize it to healthcare, where I know it best, if you're laying a foundation of a tool that's going to make decisions on historical data, and we know that if you're a person of color, you're 3 or 4 times likely to suffer disparities, no matter the illness or injury, then that AI is learning that as it's making predictive models about how to make decisions on healthcare. And the same could be said for financial sector or any sector around place-based investments in our communities. And so the question is, if we don't unroot the decisions and the biases that are in the humans that are current present and layer technology on top of that, we will only widen gaps, no matter what sector. And so there's a lot of work I'm doing with partners in the space of healthcare, trying to learn what are the current biases that are embedded in our systems and structures, so that as we leverage AI, we start to use AI to close those gaps and those disparities, as an example.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question is, how do you see the St. Louis community reacting to our Black immigrants and refugees? What are your suggestions for welcoming them into this community?
We have.
And this is open to everyone.
Okay. We have an Empower program that we started last year, and it is specifically for immigrants and refugees. Initially, it was funded by state government, then that got canceled, and it was funded by federal government, that got canceled. But we're lucky enough that a donor has contributed an amount that we can continue running that program. And really, it's based on giving individuals who come here the skill set to be able to contribute or participate in some of the workforce opportunities that we have, and we're providing language skills. So helping them to acquire the language so that they can move on from, if they desire, move on from entry-level jobs to some of the job opportunities that we have in many of our spaces here in St. Louis.
Thank you. Another question that we have, this is very specific to 16 to 18-year-olds, and there's a couple questions relating to it. And it's, what gaps do you see and what's not taught to 16 to 18-year-olds that would help them become successful and resilient leaders? Are there lessons you learned early in your career that you wish they taught in high school? Alternatively, based on your experience, are there key mental models or ways of thinking you wish they taught to 16 to 18-year-olds, whether in the classroom or through experiences, to create more resilient future leaders?
So I'll take this one, and it's part of our program called Eureka, and we also have a program called Project Accelerate. We take young people from 8th grade all the way to 24. And one of the things that we have noticed is that the smartness is not the issue. They have the 3.5s, 3.7, 3.9s, but it's the soft skills that sometimes they need a little bit more assistance in, because they've been brought up in a in a place where technology was their friend. And so when they have to go in and have a one-on-one conversation or have a critical conversation with their leader, that sometimes is a lost art. And so that would be one of the ones that I would say I wish I had when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, but that's also something we're putting back in for our young people. They say to us they don't know how to interview, they don't know how to have the one-on-one conversations. The other piece is back to what the doctor said is mental health. We're also putting our kids into the mental health space around let's think about how this trauma, because everyone has had some type of trauma showing up, and how you can work through it. So we are now dealing with society of the real, picture of what someone has told you could only be, and now they're pushing past that. So having that mental health conversation and professionals around our young people are also something that we're doing currently.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. Question specifically for Dr. Armstrong. What nugget of wisdom can you share for young Black professionals aspiring to be a leader in this community?
The first thing I would say is, I think when people talk about leadership, they first talk about supervising, wanting to supervise people. And I always say the best years of my career was when I didn't supervise anyone, but I collaborated with many people to get something done. So don't think of it just as supervising. I mean, there's a skill set that needs to be handled there, but that is a difficult thing to do. But I would say having a vision, whether it's a personal one or one that's aligned with the organization that you work for. And if they align, like if your personal vision and your organizational vision align, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful place to be. It happens to be where I am right now, which is fantastic. But have a plan to execute. So you have your vision, you have your strategy, execute, and accept failure and success, right? You're going to learn from the failure, and the success doesn't mean stop, right? It means, we can move forward. Maybe that's an opportunity to scale that particular outcome. And understand that you're not always going to be liked.
Mhm.
But that's what your mom is for, right? You go to your mom and talk to her about it. But
Speak for yourself, Dr. Armstrong. My mom's brutally honest.
Oh my gosh. Can I also build on that? Because I think going back to one of the questions, what are kids missing? And this is not just teenagers, these are adults too. Grit and perseverance. We have to learn how to, there are going to be roadblocks throughout life. And we need to know how to manage around those roadblocks. We need to have the perseverance, have the grit to say, I'm going to move forward no matter what. I just got to figure this out. I had a boss one time at Sigma, and we are good friends right now at Sigma Aldrich, and I think it's Millipore Sigma now. But I would always come to him with, well, we need to be doing this. We need to be thinking about this. We need to be doing that. And he would just finally give up and say, Cheryl, I know you're just going to do whatever you do, but just don't get me fired. Okay. And I think, as long as you are doing, for me, thinking about what's best for people that you serve or the business that you work in, you can always pivot. You can always do something different, but we have to learn perseverance. We have to learn grit and not to give up, not to stop doing what we need to do. And I think that that's in all levels of life.
Great. And then I think there's a question I'll jump in and get for you around how did as a young professional, how do you all know you found your mission, and how has that mission and purpose evolved throughout my career? And so mine began again, what problem I was trying to solve. I was a student athlete, recurring injuries and not given access to physical therapy, just meds that tore my stomach up and pain I had to play through. until I discovered what PT was as a profession and how it could heal me in a way that didn't require surgery or medicine and that allowed me to perform at a high level. And so sometimes it comes in different forms of how your lived experience plays into your future career. And for me, that's how it played out. But always trying new things, building on new experiences over time, you'll encounter a problem that you see as your mission to solve. So I would say that's one way of thinking about and then through my career, what I did was my essay for undergrad, my essay for grad school, my essay for my personal statement for my first job, I keep all of those on file. Right? So my roles may have changed, but my mission, my purpose, and the problems I'm trying to solve around everyone having the same opportunity and access to improve their well-being has not changed over time. So that's one thing I would say. And then in terms of a comment on the, how can you build white allyship from other identities of privilege? At the Integrated Health Network, we do racial caucusing. Why? To provide spaces for people who are raised white to do learning, education, and development, understanding their history in the context of African American history and Black history globally. And on the other side, we have people of global majority doing similar work, but not placing the burden on those who are targeted to do the learning and education for those who need to do it for themselves. And then doing it together. There's also a space that we come together for cross caucusing. So I would encourage companies or organizations or individuals or privileged identities to really think about how are you developing your shared understanding of what it means to support Black leadership in our communities.
So that leads to another question that has popped up. What recommendations do you have for your white colleagues to help them engage and support in the shared objective of mentorship and leadership that has been discussed this morning?
I think Dr. Jolly said it well. It's the doing your work on your side of the table. I used to do NCCJ, so that's where my background will come from, is we both have, our communities have work to do, and we have issues and opportunities to solve. But in order for us to do that, we really got to get real with what are our opportunities and what are our struggles. And then we can come together and talk about how we collectively can solve, talk about an issue, but with respect of knowing that your walk was different from my walk, and having the opportunity to step back when you don't know what you don't know, and not ask someone to be that person to teach you, but finding examples of why that might be another person's view or whatever. So letting space be in there, but also having some kind of sense of, again, your journey is a different journey, but we all can come together around a issue, possibly, and being true, and knowing that, I think Ms. Bonner said it, the truth of the matter is Black people have always been part of this history. And acknowledging that and not trying to displace the real history of America or people is where we start, I think, is let's have our own truths and have our historical data that would support it. So that's what it is for me.
Yeah, and then I would add too, recognize your privilege. Recognize the privilege that you operate in every single day, but then understand that it takes collaboration. And when we talk about working together, that means you got to speak up. That means you have to take action. You cannot remain silent when you see things that are not equitable, that aren't right, because your silence is your acquiesce. That means you agree. And so you have to be able to find it within yourself to, one, recognize that privilege, but then also be brave enough to speak up and say something and do something.
And I'd like to add, I'm channeling Valerie Patton here, but be comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. We really need to get to that space. It's going to be uncomfortable, but we need to have those conversations.
And also, can we also, I think, Michelle, you spoke to this, Cheryl, everyone. People need to understand this assault on DEI right now. this is an assault to erase history, erase people. It makes me angry as hell because I look at it through the lens of education. My child just finished college, but I have nephews coming behind him. I am really worried. Will he have the opportunity, because they are taking away all of the struts that I was able to take advantage of? I had blue collar parents. I didn't, they didn't put me through college. I put myself through college, through grants and everything else. They're taking that away. So to me, it's the allyship of standing up and speaking against what they've now made wokeism a dirty word. You don't even understand what that came from. That came from the Black community. So I think it is for all of people who are not of color, it is standing up to say what is wrong in this country, and how do you, as an ally, fight against this? Because this is talking about just emboldening racists. This is erasing our history and our impact on this country, and our children are going to suffer from that for this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cheryl. Everyone, I'm so sorry we are out of time. I know we did not get to all of the questions, but this has been a wonderful conversation. On behalf of Focus St. Louis, thank you very much. I want to let everyone know that we have, please save the date for What's Right with the Region on May 15th. We will be opening ticket sales very shortly, as well as announcing our honorees. I also want to say, please consider joining Focus as a member. We are able to have forums like this through the support of individual memberships. So thank you all. Thank you all to all the panelists, as well as everyone who logged in this morning on this cold morning. Thank you very much. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Question, Beth.
Oh,
Is
yes.
it possible to capture the questions that were not answered so we can respond to them written and provide them after?
Absolutely. We're going to be sending out an email to all the participants. So if there are any questions that you'd like to answer, I'll go ahead and send them to everyone, and we'd be happy to include your reply.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Everyone have a wonderful day.